Final Fantasy, the franchise where no game is actually the final one, has spawned more games than years I have been alive. These games have changed the landscape of gaming more times than I can count and continue to put out great games for the most part. But if we take a trip back in time to the launch of a certain game, there was a numbered installment that wasn't received very well at all, despite Square's big push to make the game as popular as it could have been. That game was Final Fantasy XIII. No, not Versus 13, that's a totally different matter. Here's just a spoiler warning since I'm going to be talking about major events in Final Fantasy XIII, so if you don't want to know anything, click away now. The game was released to mostly negative reviews, with some calling it one of the worst installments in the franchise ever. But, funny enough, Final Fantasy XIII was the very first Final Fantasy game I ever actually bought. I had watched one of my cousins play FF7 when I was very young, but I never played it and just kind of watched on the sidelines, and I never got to see the entire game play out. Also, when I was younger, and even nowadays, I gravitate towards more light-hearted games. And while I do have an appreciation, at least now, for more serious and dark themed games, I find lighthearted stuff mixed with some serious themes to be my favorite games to enjoy. And Final Fantasy always struck me as a more serious franchise that I figured I could never get into, but I wanted to try, and so I bought Final Fantasy XIII and ended up really enjoying it. Calm down and don't jump into the comments yet, sit there and let me tell the story. I enjoyed the story of FF13 for the most part, but I definitely had my issues with it. I liked Lightning and I thought the soundtrack for the game was great. I also didn't hate the gameplay mechanics and had fun with the paradigm system. It ended up being my favorite Final Fantasy game, but considering it was the only one I had played and finished, that wasn't saying much. And as time went on, I played more Final Fantasy games and became more of a fan of the franchise. I then played the original FF7, then FF8, then FF10, then FF9, then 6, then 4, and so on, and I started playing more and more games. And with pretty much each installment I played, FF13 kept getting lower and lower on my list of favorite FFs. I didn't suddenly hate the game, I still enjoy it to this day, but I see more problems with it than when I was younger. That being said, I don't totally agree with some of the criticisms that were focused on for Final Fantasy XIII, and I think there is a different reason the game does not hold up to the other installments. And no, I don't think Hallways was one of them, at least not in the sense that people seem to talk about it. Final Fantasy X had very long linear paths as well, and nobody seemed to mind it in that game, but that's also because while being linear, they managed to make it more enjoyable. A lot of the environments in Final Fantasy X just look better aesthetically, so it doesn't throw you off, and you're not in an area for so long that it begins to bore you. You can also revisit areas unlike Final Fantasy XIII, so while both games do have linear pathing hallways, 10 managed to mask it better than 13 did. So that's not the biggest issue with the game that I've noticed when comparing 13 to other installments. Was it the gameplay? Now, I've heard many people complain about the paradigm system in this game. I actually thought it was a neat take on combat, and I enjoyed coming up with strategies to fit different situations. The reason I think this system wasn't well received was because of the limits the game put on you right away in terms of how many roles a character can learn. The roles being Commando, Ravager, Sentinel, Saboteur, Synergist, and Medic. For each role in the game, you can only upgrade it in one direction with a couple branches, and the roles each character has access to is only about 2 to 3 until you reach significantly farther in the game. This never really bothered me too much, but if I had to tweak this to make it more fun for people, I would have let the player have access to all the roles of every character immediately, so they can experiment and come up with their own unique strategies and not be forced into certain roles until late game. So we've covered the linearity and combat mechanics. I'm sure my opinion might differ with yours on this, which is fine, but I don't think these two things hurt this game that much. I think this next part is the biggest issue with FF13. The characters themselves. Now that's a whole different can of worms. I think this is the biggest issue with the game, because even though I enjoy the combat mechanics and a lot of the story, if you don't have likable characters, a story falls apart. You won't care what the outcome is because you're not invested in the people you're following on the adventure. And I think that makes the issues more glaring, because now you have to spend hours of your time time playing as these people you dislike or even hate. And this is the big reason Final Fantasy XIII kept dropping lower and lower on my favorite Final Fantasy games list. As I played more Final Fantasy games, I realized how good the party members were in those other games. And when looking back at FF13 and comparing them to those other parties, they fell short, for putting it mildly. So let me tell you about the only two characters I like in FF13 first. I like Lightning. A lot of people at the time kept saying she was just female Cloud, but I never agreed with that statement. Cloud is female Cloud.
You? Oh my god, that makeup! And that dress!
Nailed it, I know, thank you.
Are both Cloud and Lightning hardened badasses that open up more to people as the plot goes on and become more personable because of the people they interact with while still being able to kick some serious ass? Then yes, they are similar. But to call Lightning a ripoff of Cloud seems odd to me. This archetype had been done in media before Cloud was even a thing. So would you say Cloud was a ripoff of those characters? No, you wouldn't. I guess it's easy to jump to that conclusion because we are talking about the same franchise in which these characters exist, but a lot of those tropes carry over into other games as well. It's not unique to Final Fantasy. Sometimes the company might want to do the archetype again, but with a slight modification to try and keep it fresh. I also like that Lightning is, say it with me, a flawed character. In no way, shape, or form is Lightning always portrayed as being perfect. She's made plenty of bad choices, and ones she even regrets, like how she treats her sister upon learning about her becoming a l'Cie.
But don't forget, if you really are a l'Cie, it's my job to deal with you.
She said some pretty horrible shit to Sarah when all Sarah wanted from her big sister was to be there for her in a time where she had no clue what to do with her life anymore, and she was scared. Sure, jumping into a marriage right away might seem odd given the circumstances, but she had no idea how long she had left, and I can't exactly blame her for wanting to do something for herself before her time was up. Lightning couldn't see it that way and just blew up at her. And I'm not a Hope fan, but she even treats Hope like crap too. Here is this kid who's looking up to you and wants to learn how to become stronger because they see you as a role model they can learn from. And she treats him badly until her summon smacks some sense into her. And we do see Lightning become vulnerable or shy in scenes as well, which is great because it shows she isn't some stoic goddess. I'm strictly talking about the first game here. She has a pretty funny and nice moment with Hope when he calls her mom in his sleep.
Not by a long shot.
And she even gets a bit shy when Fang wants to see her l'Cie mark.
Let's have a look. Don't be shy.
Moments like these are important because it shows your character is human and not some amazing, stoic, always right character. And I really like Lightning because she does have a wider range of emotions, badass skills, and flaws. I think the only thing I have to say when it comes to Lightning in terms of a criticism is that Lightning sometimes doesn't feel like the main character. The screen time is definitely more divided in this game than others, and I don't think it helps that a lot of the game, the party members are split up, so we follow each person's story, the majority of which don't involve Lightning. Whereas with other Final Fantasies, there may be moments of other characters getting developing moments, but the MC is usually present and with them. Now for the rest of the party. I like Sazh. At first you think he's just a bumbling old guy, but when you get clues about his internal struggle with l'Cie and what should become of them, you see it's not as clear-cut as he makes it out to be. I think the dynamic with his son Dodge was great, and that moment with Vanille still sends shivers down my spine to this day. And that moment is enhanced because Sazh is still conflicted. He wants vengeance for what Vanille did to cause his son to become a l'Cie, but he also doesn't want to go through with it because he knows it would just be morally wrong to shoot her. When he knows she's just a kid who made a mistake, he's angry and sad and doesn't know what to do with those emotions and where to direct them. Seeing him that broken was extremely sad to watch, especially when the way he was introduced was as the funny old guy. As for the rest, I don't think much of them. Snow is fine, but he kind of annoys me more now than he did previously with his I'm the hero attitude when he constantly blunders a lot of things. And that's his character in a nutshell. Talk big, then stumble, and rinse and repeat. I think Vanille put it best.
First impression of Snow? All talk.
Even when Snow is hit with very real consequences, his personality doesn't change. He just goes back to smirking and saying stuff like this.
Hey,
Since when have heroes ever needed plans?
You could argue that maybe the party needs a person with absolute positivity, but Snow doesn't provide the party with any real answers to any big questions or gives good advice. All he says is, don't worry, everything will be fine because I'm me. Hope, I always found annoying, and before you type in the comments, but he lost his mom so it's understandable and he's just a kid who doesn't know how to cope, yes, all of that is true, and if you like Hope, more power to you. I don't. The way I look at it is from a player's perspective. Hope's mother dies right away, pretty much as soon as he's introduced, and the next scene is her dying. And I understand that he's angry at Snow because if he never asked for help, she wouldn't have been killed. But Hope, your mom offered. It's not like Snow strong-armed her into helping him. That was her choice, and it was to help protect you. And from a storytelling perspective, this was the least interesting thing they could have done. Because what it does to Hope is it makes his entire character one-dimensional by being the angry I want revenge character. The only thing he has on his mind is revenge, and on a character who is understandably annoying but not an evil person. The majority of Hope's dialogue is him blowing up at other party members and wanting Lightning to be his new mommy so he can murder Snow. Then after he comes to the realization he doesn't want to kill Snow anymore, he literally just becomes a good unit. There is no more story to tell with him, he's just along to be your synergist/medic. Now you can argue the same thing happens to Sazh, that after the whole Vanille incident and him finding out that Dahj can actually still be saved, and he's just along for the ride too, but at the very least, he still has a personal stake in all of this, and that isn't just, I don't want to turn into a monster, he wants to save his son. He also never started out hating members of the group randomly and actually had nice things to say most of the time. Sure, he questioned a lot of Lightning's choices, but it wasn't because he didn't like her, he just thought most of what she might have put the younger members through was ridiculous, and him being a father, that is completely justified. Vanille, I have no feelings either way towards. I don't like her, but I don't hate her. But you could argue that's being the worst character of all because you have no strong feelings either way towards the character and they're just a blur. The most interesting thing about Vanille is how her story coincides with Sazh, and then after that I don't care anymore. Same thing with Fang, but with Fang she's thrown in rather late into the main group and her story is tied to Vanille, who I already don't care for. And she doesn't add much to the dynamic. And that's a huge problem with this party dynamic and chemistry. The story separates these characters into the partners they could grow from, or at least what little growth they do get, and with other members they have little to no chemistry. What's Hope and Sazh's chemistry? Nothing. What's Snow and Sazh's chemistry? Nothing. And that's the problem with this party. Not only are they undeveloped characters, they don't bounce off each other like other Final Fantasy parties do. Even Lightning, who's the main character, doesn't have much of a reason to talk to anyone besides Snow and Hope for the most part. So out of the 6 members, I only actually like 2. And that's the biggest problem with this game compared to other Final Fantasy games. This game has a pretty weak cast, and that's what I think really hurts this game. When I played other Final Fantasies, each party has a great cast of characters that learn and grow and are interesting, and you want to follow their adventures all the way through. I couldn't believe it. After playing as so many other characters in this franchise, I just thought they created all these great characters, and for 13 you came up with these guys? To put it simply, most party members in any RPG mostly have that one character you don't care for at all. Well, 13's party was like, you know that one character you don't care for? What if we made the majority of the party that? Even the characters who aren't in the main cast, none of them are memorable or noteworthy. Side characters can help prop up a main party member's character development and even add to the world being more alive and vibrant. They're important in how a player participates and indulges in world building. Look at Snow's crew, for example. Do you honestly remember any of these guys' names? Nobody would blame you if you didn't. Now, do you remember the names of the people in Barrett's crew? Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge. And I don't just remember Biggs and Wedge because of Star Wars. I remember them because they are actually fleshed out characters and are fun to interact with, which this game is lacking big time. And as for your main foe Barthandelus, he's just as boring and unmemorable. And if you do remember this guy, it isn't because of his character, it's because he would piss you off by killing you with that stupid death timer. Barthandelus is just a final boss, nothing more, nothing less. His dynamic with the party is lackluster, and the only memorable thing he does, because it's so creepy, is when he transforms into Sarah. Listen, I'm not a big Sephiroth fan, and there is a lot I don't care for when it comes to Sephiroth, but there is no denying he has a presence to him and is intimidating as Coupled with that amazing theme song, you're going to remember this guy. Even Kefka, with all the dark stuff he's done, and Kuja for his fashion sense, there are more villains in other games who stand out. There are files in the game you can collect and read up more on Barthandelus, but I don't think this makes him a better character. It's storytelling 101. Show, don't tell. I don't want to read in some optional content about how his personality and mind work. Show me in the main story. That's what it's there for. Documents like that are for fun Easter eggs and extra content that gives you fun little tidbits, not major character developing moments. He's extremely lackluster, and this explains the weak party because, as the old saying goes, a hero is only as good as its villain. Or honestly, with the party in this game, you could probably reverse that line, it would still apply. That is the biggest weakness of Final Fantasy XIII. It's understandable if you're watching this and still disagree and don't like the battle system or story, and that's perfectly fine. We're not all going to agree on everything. But I do believe a lot of issues people had with the game might have been not as cumbersome if the characters engage the player more on an emotional level. That's my 2 cents though, and I do truly thank you for listening to my 2 cents. While Final Fantasy XIII has dropped further down on my list of Final Fantasy games, I do still appreciate a lot of what this game does, and I think it's still worth a playthrough if you're a Final Fantasy fan. You may find issues that I myself don't have a problem with, but you may find something you like that I and others might have overlooked. I do still think Final Fantasy XIII deserves more praise than hate, but that's just one guy's opinion. Thanks for watching. Nath out.